welcome. We're here at the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association annual meeting. And we're here with Archer Lebron, who has had an illustrious career in technology on the island of Puerto Rico. And maybe important to this particular audience was the president of the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association Technology Committee for a number of years. And Archer and I have had some great conversations about technology development and enhancements on the island of Puerto Rico. And so I really wanted to interview Archer for this segment so that we can talk a little bit about what the future looks like for Puerto Rico based on some of the historic past. So, to start out, I know that with your history at the Technology Committee, you talked about participating a lot in strategic planning. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you faced in that annual strategic planning process from a technology perspective?
Well, first of all, Gail, if you could hear me fine, I just want to start off by thanking you for inviting me to this presentation or interview. To me, it's an honor to always be part of the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association. I consider myself part of that, renamed and prestigious family. I spent about 12, 13, maybe even more years as a board member or either president of their technology committee, among other committees, such as the convention committee, which I participated for many, many years as well. And I do recall that for many years, I was supporting other fellow colleagues in preparing the educational agenda for the convention. So it brings a lot of memories, good memories, in fact. So thank you. With regards to the question about PRMA and the organization itself, and PRMA and its challenges, right? Specifically, in the topic that we're vested, which is, innovation, technology, digital transformation, there are many things we can talk about. We first have to mention that PRMA is a nonprofit organization. So that by itself poses a big challenge because most, if not all of the people that work and collaborate there are doing so because they're volunteering their work, their talents, their time, their efforts, right? And it's not the same when you have an organization which is paying you for the time you dedicate to accomplish certain goals, whereas you have people that are just coming together to collaborate and try to accomplish something for the good of the country. So that's kind of like the first barrier, right? But there are many other barriers. Like I consider PRMA always trying to be on top of the economic development effort for the island. Those are gigantic words because we have a government who's responsible for that, but the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association from its inception has always tried to leverage the business model. Obviously, for decades, we have been working on manufacturing and services verticals. While I was there, my goal, and this was me as a personal ambition, my goal was to create awareness on digital transformation, innovation, and technology as a new business model for the 21st century for PRMA, which that was kind of like a first.
You were using that word before most other people were.
Yes, so many years ago, we were involved already in these discussions, and we had the best of all times. I mean, I could tell you right off the bat that it was well received, that discourse, that the awareness, the vision, and the dream of creating this possibility where a new business model based on innovation and technology was accessible, was possible. But then came other challenges, like the one I just mentioned about people and their time. But then there's like other situations where how do we come together? If you recall, PRMA has, so many committees, probably 25, 30 committees that have come together at the end of the day and work with the board members and the president of the board and the staff of PRMA to accomplish something. So, major difficulties was lack of resources because it's not a private organization, number one. Number two, not necessarily understanding the capability of technology as a strategic weapon to face, these challenges. Not having the time to invest or the resource to invest into these innovative technologies. And then they had many other smaller challenges, which was the office of PRMA required operational logistics, systems, software, and support. So we had to address and attend those as well. So it was a complex and a combination of all those factors that made it very difficult or uphill for PRMA to address technology as their principal vertical. My dream has always been that the PRMA would take on innovation and technology as their most prized vertical, their most prized strategy among all the others like manufacturing and services, because I think that's kind of like the future, right?
Right.
I hope I can see that one day, but we're not there yet.
Exactly. And I just want to interject that these are not unique challenges to Puerto Rico or the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association. I worked in similar teams throughout the country, and kind of that volunteer collaboration role is really difficult because everybody has their kind of, we call them the real job. And then you've got passion towards this organization, but trying to balance both of those becomes challenging. And the interface when you're only meeting once a month is not like you would find in traditional work environments. So
absolutely.
That actually segues into the next question that we had talked about. You and I had worked on an NSF engine proposal about 9 months ago. And during that process, we were envisioning the purpose of these engines were to drive forward that collaborative process within a region and create something that would stimulate the economy, and they use the gear analogy. It'd be the center gear that everything else moves around that gear in a very robust way. And one of the things as we were putting together that proposal was the recognition that there would need to be some tool that connected these people on a daily basis because they didn't have time to connect in the traditional work week type of environment. And as we were envisioning what that tool would look like, you came to me and said, yeah, I've already got something. And so could you talk a little bit about your, already got something as in Imagine Together?
Well, that's kind of funny you bring that, right? Because it was such a big coincidence. And it has to do with your first question as well, with PRMA and its challenges. Because while I was at PRMA, I had this dream of providing a tool eventually that I envision as a vehicle to make transformation within the organization that could help people come together, that could create an environment where committees and the board and the staff and any logistical organizational member of PRMA would have a common ground where we can talk and collaborate and coordinate our projects, right, our goals. And so I initiated a development for many, many years. PRMA does not really know about this. There's only probably 1 or 2 persons that really know about this effort. I invested well over $600,000 of my own money just to create this. Yes, and then so we never did finish it. It's like 90% completed. But then came pandemic and so many other challenges, and some things were still needed to be addressed, and we didn't have that chance for other reasons. So one day I received a call from you, Gail, and you were like, Archer, we need to come together because I have this thing going on, PR 5G zone, and you explained the concept and the NSF proposal, which you initiated, and you asked for some support and help, and I gladly joined you. It was a pleasure to help you with that. And as we were working through the process, you were always talking about software tools and platforms that would help, the PR5G and other organizations in Puerto Rico kind of like achieve their collaborative efforts together. And we were looking and addressing many tools, right? And even though I knew I had this platform and application, which I had invested in, I never brought it up until one day I just said, Gail, I never brought this up, but maybe you should just take a look at this because it's not really finished. It's almost finished. It's almost done, but it might be something we could look into, right? And I showed you that platform which we called Imagine Together. So, I mean, I know you fell in love with it, and we are pursuing dreams together with this platform. But the whole idea of Imagine Together in alignment with PR5G was that we could, I mean, you have over 100 people probably supporting this effort with the NSF proposal, among other initiatives and strategies. And how do we get all these people to work together? I mean, how do we establish this common ground, a common language? How do we measure that progress? Right? How do we know where?
So that there's not one person, that everyone has equal authority.
Exactly. And so when we saw the tool and you had agreed with me, we saw potential capability of the tool to bring all these folks, all these people and teams together. And so that's where we're at with regards to that. We haven't used it at PRMA. Eventually, maybe one day we will have that opportunity. But my faith is that with your effort in Puerto Rico 5G zone, that we can create the laboratories, the national infrastructure in alignment with the US and its infrastructure. So we can create and research on new platforms and new applications and new technologies that will not just bring people together and create innovative opportunities, but will create a space where knowledge and where experience will be captured to produce results, and we can measure them.
Absolutely. And so now talk a little bit about measuring, because that's the OKR principle. And I will say, as much as most of my career was in collaboration activities, I had not heard about OKRs, and it's a brilliant thing. And so talk a little bit about that and your basis for embracing that.
Well, well, when I did my MBA and I focused on information systems, I fell in love with a guy called Peter Drucker. And many people know him. And though he's not of our generation, he's from probably a couple generations behind, his principles and ideas are still valid today. He coined a phrase that says the only skill that will be important in the 21st century is the skill of learning new skills. Everything else will become obsolete over time. And that was back probably in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Wow. And I think World Economic Forum just came out with a report saying that their projections are every 5 years, people will need to learn 44% of their skills anew.
I'm telling you, and now with the advent of AI and analytics and big data and the internet trends, the time that we have to reskill ourselves is even shorter, right? So it's important that we are pretty much aligned with our organizational goals and our performance and productivity objectives, because if not, competitiveness will be lost, right? And to get there, each individual will have to be as competitive as possible so that that team can perform according to the overall necessity, overall objectives of the organization. Regarding the OKR, and going back to Peter Drucker was his PhD in management. He's the father of modern management, of course, and he's the father of knowledge management. And so he coined many phrases, and I just had passion for his principles. He said things like the organization must be single-minded, or its members will become confused, right? They will follow their own specialty rather than apply to a common task. They will each define results in terms of their own specialty and impose its value on the organization. It should be on the contrary. I mean, only a focused common mission will hold the organization together and enable it to produce. So if you take these guidelines, there are many objectives and goals in an organization, but if they're not aligned with where the organization needs to move and how to compete in a world like ours, performance, productivity, time, effort will be lost. So he invented this concept of management by objectives, which eventually another disciple of Drucker, like Andy Grove, founder of Intel, another PhD in management, created this concept of objective key results. Nothing new. He took management by objectives and created a system. And back in the day, it was a manual system. And what he did was he created a methodology where the most important goals and objectives of an organization could be trickled down to the organizational departments, teams, and individuals, and they would be aligned and integrated so that organization can function as one whole common body. Eventually, fast forward 3-4 decades, with all the technology going on, there's so much to be accomplished in terms of how do we establish goals for organization? How do we come together with the teams, with the individuals? How do we collaborate? How do we coordinate? How do we create and manage and even archive knowledge and experience so that it can become the most prestigious and strategic asset of that organization? So that's what an OKR system does. And then it has a metrics system so you can measure performance based on individual, team, and as a whole organization.
Which is so fascinating. And in fact, I just had a conversation with somebody who managed a team of 750 engineers. And I said, how did you manage 750 engineers? And he said, I didn't. Because there's no way that you can know what everyone's doing. And so he said, you get to be very outcome dependent, but there are gaps in that where you can't look at on a daily basis. You can't track what those many people are doing. And so I think that's what was so attractive about your tool. I actually want to go into the next part where we talk a little bit about how we were excited about that there had not been an automated tool. And we started this discussion about a year ago, so we thought this is going to be great. We have since discovered that Microsoft is actually creating a new add-on tool for this, and which is wonderful, amazing, but very centric towards an organization. And so there's still an opportunity. And I want to go back to the beginning of this conversation where we talked about the annual strategic planning process by which you started working with PRMA, and then the engine proposal through NSF, where the idea was you have to be able to track and manage large and kind of disparate groups of individuals towards outcomes and then report on those outcomes. What we were thinking now, and what seems to make sense, is that there was another methodology we wrote into that NSF proposal around strategic doing, which is an initiative really on fire across the country, was developed at Purdue, is now at University of Northern Alabama. But talk about so the idea would be we would take, instead of the OKRs being individually populated, you would start at the very beginning of the strategic planning process and build into that process, what the end would look like, where a lot of times, so I'm asking you, I guess, to kind of go back full circle. And what would that have looked like in your processes for planning at PRMA to begin with? And I'm sorry, that wasn't one of our questions, but it just occurred to me that this conversation has gone back in circle to the original challenge.
Well, it's a great question, because if we think about this, OKR, like I said, is not necessarily a new thing. It's actually an old management approach. What is innovative about it is the fact that we can, with the tools we have today and the technologies, we can do so many things about that. And we can not just create and manage, we can archive knowledge, and we can extract beyond our wildest dreams. When back in the day Peter Drucker was who he was, we can extract experiences as knowledge as we can today, things that he probably was even aware of. But to your question, and talking about the tools we have today, I believe artificial intelligence plays a big role in what you're referring to, right? And though we do have some machine learning within our platform, but true artificial intelligence would interact with the humankind, and put very simple terms, the capability of extracting information from the individuals and its teams and putting those into repositories, so that the system can eventually put that into the context that it is required, so it can be transformed into knowledge, right? So information put into context will become knowledge, and knowledge being executed will become experience. And artificial intelligence is kind of like the technology, the vehicle that can interact with the human beings and with the whole system, and without us even knowing, can take all that capability of capturing information data, and while we're sleeping, create this massive amount of information and knowledge that could be at our disposal that very next day. So as long as you have an OKR approach, what is important here is the principle, right? Peter Drucker came out with a vision and a principle. I mean, we could add to that, technology.
Intersection with AI, specifically because many of us don't even know our own skills or talents, or in fact our own weaknesses. And we've all sat at strategic planning sessions where people start getting assigned the different elements within a strategic planning session, and it doesn't always go to the individual or the group of individuals that maybe has the right combination of skill sets, because it's all based on willingness versus on skill sets. And so it would be so powerful to be able to empower people in their strengths, and then put together teams to help minimize weaknesses, which we all have. So
I'll give you an example of how AI can also extend the capability of a platform like this. In an OKR approach, everyone is doing their thing individually and together at the team level, at an organizational level, right? If we can produce AI code that will take everything that is happening with each individual, his or her core competences, his or her talents, his or her experiences, and how they connect and how they flow with other teams and with the rest of the organization, and his capability to perform. How many times has he performed beyond 95%? How many times has he failed? What are his biggest strengths or weakness? I mean, all that type of information, the same system will have the ability to point out your biggest or your biggest weakness within the organization.
right,
Because it could set aside, we have so many people that are not skilled enough and are underperforming. And at the same time, it could identify those power users or those people that are exceeding in the organization, that not just deserve raises and appraisals, but have to be put in further challenges so they can continue exceeding and performing for the organization. And they can also become leaders to help transform the rest of the culture. You see, there's someone out there who said, I think it was Peter Drucker as well, who said, culture eats methodology for breakfast. So if your platform can accomplish to transform your culture, I mean, methodology is the least of your worries.
This has been such a great conversation, and we could talk for a much longer time, but our time is up. But I just think that's a great place to stop, actually, because that was exactly what we were talking about using this tool, was in the management of these federal resources to make sure that we were assigning resources based on maximum capability and maximum return. And so this kind of tool can do exactly that. So thank you so much, Archer. And I'm going to say it's not necessarily just about this kind of tool. This is what the future of tools in manufacturing, and it's not just the hardware that runs the plant. It's the hardware or the software or the products that connect the people. And that is really the next generation for manufacturing, is how do we most effectively connect people. So thank you so much for your time.
I just have one last comment, and I mean, no matter how powerful the tool, we will always need the vision and the right leadership to make that tool work as it should be, right? So transformation will come through that leadership, that guidance, obviously with the right tool. So it's important to have both concepts covered. And obviously, if I were to choose, I'd choose leadership and vision, and then I could get my tool, right? So Gayo, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much for having me, and looking forward.
Thank you, Archer. Really appreciate that.